Tempest in Teyvat, Rimuru's Elemental Odyssey by KabirSingh808. Convergence of Fates. The soft sound of a fork clinking against porcelain echoed through the grand office as Farina happily indulged in the cake Rimuru had made for her. She sat comfortably on an elegant blue and gold sofa, savoring each bite, while Rimuru stood beside her, arms crossed, watching her with mild amusement. "You really like sweets, huh?" Rimuru commented as he observed how quickly Farina was finishing her slice. Farina, not looking up, responded with a haughty tone, "Of course. A dessert made by my personal chef, by you, must be appreciated properly." Rimuru chuckled, but before he could respond, a knock came from the door. Farina paused mid-bite, her gaze shifting toward the entrance. She quickly wiped her mouth with a napkin before saying, "Enter." A Fontaine guard stepped in, bowing respectfully before speaking. "Miss Farina, today is your scheduled meeting session with the citizens of Fontaine. We've prepared the necessary arrangements." Farina blinked in realization. "Oh, right, I almost forgot." She placed her plate aside and stretched slightly before gesturing toward the guard. "Hand me the list of people I'll be meeting today." The guard stepped forward and presented a document, which Farina casually took. As she scanned the names, her previously relaxed demeanor instantly stiffened. Her eyes widened slightly, and her grip on the paper tightened. "Arlecchino," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Standing beside her, Rimuru's gaze immediately followed hers, locking onto the name at the very top of the list. His expression darkened slightly. What is she up to? He thought. Arlecchino was not someone who would request an audience without a reason, and if she was here in an official capacity, then it likely meant trouble. Farina's hands trembled slightly as she lowered the list. "See, can't we postpone this meeting?" she asked hesitantly, glancing at the guard. The guard hesitated before responding, "Well, we can delay it, but it's already been quite some time since you've met with Fontaine's citizens in an official capacity. If we push it back again, rumors might spread, especially after the recent attack on you." Farina bit her lip, clearly weighing her options. She looked at the list once more before sighing deeply and closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, a forced sense of composure returned to her. "Fine. Start the preparations. I'll be there soon." The guard bowed and exited the room. As soon as the door shut, Farina turned toward Rimuru and asked, "What do you think I should do?" Rimuru studied her carefully before speaking. "Are you afraid of Arlecchino?" Farina's eyes widened in surprise, and she immediately straightened her posture. "Oh, of course not," she declared, almost too quickly. Rimuru smirked slightly at her reaction. "Then you should meet her. If she came all this way, she clearly has something important to discuss." Farina still seemed reluctant, shifting slightly on her feet. But then she hesitated before saying, I don't want to go alone." Rimuru sighed internally. He already knew where this was going. "Fine. If it makes you feel better, I'll come with you." Farina immediately brightened. "Yes, you must come with me," she insisted, as if sealing a verbal contract. Rimuru shook his head, amused by how quickly she latched onto the idea. All right, let's go, then." Farina nodded and turned toward the door, her determination now solidified. Rimuru followed closely behind, his mind still pondering what Arlecchino could possibly want. The grand hall of Palais Mermonia was already filled with Fontaine's esteemed citizens, all waiting for their turn to meet with the Hydro-Archon. Nobles, merchants, and officials stood in orderly lines, some murmuring among themselves as they noticed Farina's arrival. But all their attention was drawn to the lone figure standing at the forefront, Arlecchino. Dressed in her usual black and red ensemble, she stood motionless, her piercing crimson eyes focused entirely on Farina. There was no warmth in her gaze, no smirk, no feigned pleasantries, only cold, unshaken resolve. The moment Farina stepped inside, her confident strides faltered for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, barely noticeable to most, but Rimuru, walking beside her, caught it instantly. Her hands clenched slightly at her sides, though she quickly forced herself to appear unfazed. The tension in the room was suffocating. The murmurs grew louder, whispers of concern and speculation spreading among the officials and nobles. The presence of a high-ranking Fatui harbinger inside Fontaine's palace was alarming, even more so because she wasn't here under official Fatui business. As Farina took her seat, she leaned back slightly, crossing her legs to maintain her usual regal posture. But her sharp blue eyes never left Arlecchino. "To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit, Miss Knave?" Farina asked, her voice carefully neutral. Arlecchino remained silent for a moment, her gaze unwavering. Then, in a calm and steady voice, she finally spoke. "I am here today not as a harbinger of the Fatui, but as a citizen of Fontaine." A ripple of surprise swept through the hall. Even Farina seemed momentarily caught off guard. "As a citizen," she repeated, narrowing her eyes slightly. Arlecchino gave a small nod. "Yes, my business here today is purely personal." The weight of her words settled heavily in the chamber. Rimuru watched carefully, his instincts telling him that whatever this meeting was about, it was important. Arlecchino wasn't the type to make unnecessary moves. If she was here, it was for something significant. Farina exhaled softly, steeling herself before responding. "If your business is personal, then we shall not discuss it here," Farina stated. "Let us move to a more private setting." Without waiting for a response, she stood up and gestured toward one of the side doors leading to a smaller, more secluded meeting room. Rimuru followed closely behind her, his eyes never leaving Arlecchino, who simply nodded and walked alongside them. The tension in the air was thick as they stepped into the room. The walls were lined with ornate blue and gold patterns, the Fontaine crest shining elegantly above a polished wooden table in the center. A large window allowed the golden afternoon light to seep in, casting soft shadows across the room. Farina took her seat first, adjusting the flowing fabric of her dress as she settled into the chair at the head of the table. Rimuru remained standing behind her, arms crossed in a relaxed yet attentive posture. Meanwhile, Arlecchino sat across from Farina, her usual composed and unreadable expression in place. The room fell into silence for a moment, the quiet only broken by the faint ticking of a nearby clock. Farina folded her hands on the table and let out a soft sigh before speaking. "Now that we are in private, you may speak freely. What is it that brings you here today, Arlecchino?" Rimuru watched carefully, sensing that this conversation was about to take a serious turn. Arlecchino met Farina's gaze, her crimson eyes unwavering. Arlecchino's voice was calm yet firm as she began. "Miss Farina, the matter I wish to discuss with you concerns the prophecy." At the mere mention of the prophecy, Farina's once relaxed posture stiffened. A flicker of discomfort passed through her deep blue eyes, but she quickly masked it with an air of nonchalance, leaning back into her seat. "The prophecy," she repeated, her tone sharp with forced indifference. "What of it?" Arlecchino observed Farina's reaction before continuing. "You know well what I mean. The prophecy that looms over Fontaine, the fate that speaks of its destruction. It is not something you can simply ignore." Farina scoffed, crossing her arms. "And what exactly do you expect me to do, Arlecchino? Run around Fontaine shouting that the end is near? Create mass hysteria?" Arlecchino's gaze hardened. "You sit here, acting as if ignoring the problem will make it disappear, but you cannot escape the truth forever. The waters of Fontaine will rise, and when they do you really think your avoidance will save anyone?" Farina's grip on the armrest of her chair tightened. "I am not avoiding anything," she snapped. "I am maintaining order. If I were to openly acknowledge the prophecy, people would fall into despair. You, of all people, should understand the consequences of that." Arlecchino leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "And what will you do when the inevitable happens? When the waters rise and Fontaine crumbles? Will you still play the role of an unbothered god, pretending that you had no part to play?" The tension in the room grew heavier as Arlecchino's crimson eyes bore into Farina, her voice sharp and unwavering. "You're just ignoring the issue, Miss Farina." Farina flinched slightly at the accusation, her hands tightening into small fists on her lap. "No, I don't," she responded hesitantly, though the lack of conviction in her voice was apparent. Arlecchino's gaze remained unwavering. "Then tell me, what plans do you have for the people of Fontaine as their archon?" Farina's lips parted, but no words came out. Her mind raced for an answer, something, anything, to dispel the doubt in Arlecchino's piercing gaze. But deep down, she knew she couldn't provide an answer, not when she herself had no idea how to handle the prophecy. Arlecchino, seeing the hesitation, let out a quiet sigh and leaned back slightly in her chair. "Just as I suspected. You don't have a plan, do you?" Farina opened her mouth to refute, but the look Arlecchino gave her, the same cold, calculating stare she had seen countless times before, made her freeze. It was the look of someone who had already decided the truth for themselves. Before Farina could gather herself, Rimuru finally intervened. I think that's enough, Lady Arlecchino. Arlecchino's eyes shifted toward him, her expression unreadable. Oh. But as an archon, Miss Farina has a duty to answer to the people, especially regarding something as dangerous as the prophecy. Rimuru remained composed. That may be true, but as an archon, she also has the right to privacy. While the waters are rising, we still can't say for certain whether the prophecy will come to pass or not. So I ask that you refrain from forcing Miss Farina's hand before it's time. Arlecchino studied Rimuru for a moment, then smirked faintly, though it held no warmth. So you're also admitting that she doesn't have a plan if the prophecy does come to pass. Rimuru's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. Who said she doesn't have a plan? That caught Arlecchino's attention. Amusement flickered across her face as she leaned forward slightly. Oh, then please, Mr. Rimuru, indulge me, what exactly is this plan of hers? Rimuru's expression didn't waver. It's a secret plan, he said smoothly. One that will only be put into action if the prophecy comes to pass. And I can assure you, it is an effective one. At his words, Farina turned her head sharply toward Rimuru, her eyes wide with surprise. A plan? What plan? She wanted to ask, but Rimuru shot her a quick glance and a small, knowing smile before she could say anything. Catching on, Farina quickly straightened and nodded, though the hesitation in her voice was still clear. Why yes. You don't have to worry, Lady Arlecchino. We have a plan to protect everyone. Arlecchino's gaze flickered between them, her eyes narrowing slightly. She could sense that something was off, but after a moment, she simply sighed. We'll see if this so-called plan of yours really exists when the time comes. Then, standing up, she adjusted her coat and glanced at the clock. Looks like it's time for me to take my leave. You still have more people to meet, after all. Farina immediately nodded, eager to move on from the conversation. Yes, of course. Thank you for your visit, Lady Arlecchino. As the door opened, Arlecchino took one last glance at Rimuru and Farina before silently stepping out of the room. The door closed behind her, and as soon as she was gone, Farina let out a long breath and turned to Rimuru. What was that? A secret plan? Do you realize what you just did? Rimuru just grinned. I bought us time. Farina groaned, rubbing her temples. I don't know whether to thank you or scold you. Rimuru chuckled. Just go with, thank you. You can figure out the rest later. Farina sighed but said nothing more. She knew this conversation was far from over. The sun had begun its descent, casting an orange hue over the grand halls of the Palais Mermonia. Farina stretched her arms with an exaggerated sigh, her exhaustion evident after spending hours meeting with Fontaine's citizens. That was tiring, she muttered, rolling her shoulders as if to relieve the tension. Rimuru, standing beside her, simply nodded. It definitely is. Though he agreed verbally, he himself wasn't particularly exhausted. As a king in his own land, he was used to holding meetings with all kinds of people, merchants, nobles, diplomats, and even troublemakers. Compared to those, this was nothing. As Farina started walking toward the door, she glanced at Rimuru. Let's go. However, Rimuru stopped her with a polite tone. Miss Farina, would it be all right if I sent a clone with you? I have some matters to discuss with the Chief Justice. Farina raised an eyebrow. With Neuvillette. Rimuru nodded. She crossed her arms. And what could that be about? Rimuru smiled lightly. I'll tell you once I return. Farina sighed, clearly not pleased with the vague response. Fine, but don't take too long. After all those meetings, I want to eat something made by you. Rimuru chuckled. Of course, Miss Farina. With that, he summoned a clone, who immediately took his place by Farina's side. Meanwhile, the real Rimuru turned and headed toward Neuvillette's office. Inside the Chief Justice's office, Neuvillette sat behind his grand desk, his piercing yet calm gaze studying Rimuru as he finished listening to his request. So, you're asking for a favor in exchange for accepting the dual conditions. Rimuru nodded. That's right. Neuvillette clasped his hands together. Then let us discuss it. What exactly do you want? Rimuru's expression remained composed. It's simple, I want the right to act as Miss Farina's champion if she is ever challenged to a duel in court. Nouvelette's gaze lingered on Rimuru for a moment. The request was unexpected. After a short pause, he asked, "Are you sure about this?" Rimuru nodded without hesitation. "I am." Nouvelette studied him, his expression unreadable. "I see, is that all?" Rimuru shook his head. "There's one more thing. If, somehow, I lose my duel and Miss Farina finds herself standing trial in court, I want the right to act as her lawyer." For the first time in their conversation, Nouvelette's eyes slightly narrowed. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his desk. "Why are you asking for these things, Mr. Rimuru?" Rimuru's gaze didn't waver. "I have my own reasons." Nouvelette remained silent for a moment, deep in thought. Rimuru was an intelligent individual. He should have realized by now just how disadvantageous the conditions of the new law were for him. Nouvelette had assumed that Rimuru had come to negotiate for his own safety, yet instead, he was requesting measures to protect Farina. Nouvelette exhaled lightly before giving his verdict. "Very well. I believe this is fair enough. However, even if you fight on Miss Farina's behalf, the restrictions and new rules placed upon you will still apply." Rimuru smiled slightly. "I don't mind." Nouvelette watched him carefully. "Strange. I expected you to argue for better conditions for yourself. Yet here you are, ensuring Miss Farina's safety instead." Rimuru simply smiled but didn't explain further. Nouvelette turned to the side, considering the implications before finally speaking. "I will make adjustments to the new law and include your request." Rimuru gave a respectful nod. "Much appreciated, Monsieur Nouvelette." With that, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind a thoughtful and slightly perplexed Nouvelette, who couldn't help but wonder. Why does he go so far for her? As Rimuru returned to Farina's office, the familiar sight of the Hydro Archon greeted him, seated at her desk, casually enjoying a slice of cake. The delicate clinking of her fork against the plate echoed softly in the room. His clone stood beside her, keeping a silent vigil, but the moment Rimuru stepped in, he waved a hand, causing the clone to vanish instantly. Farina, noticing his arrival, perked up. "Ah, Rimuru, you're back." Rimuru nodded and walked toward her desk. She set her fork down, tilting her head slightly. "So, what exactly did you need to discuss with Nouvelette?" Rimuru folded his arms. "It was a request for some adjustments to the new rule." At this, Farina's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, so you finally decided to fight for better conditions?" Rimuru nodded simply. "Indeed, I did." Farina leaned forward slightly, tapping her fingers against the desk. "You should have told me beforehand. I would have personally spoken with Nouvelette about this." Rimuru let out a small chuckle. "You don't have to concern yourself with my matters, Miss Farina." Farina narrowed her eyes at him. "What are you talking about? It's no big deal." Rimuru watched her for a moment before a gentle smile formed on his lips. He stepped closer, standing by her side. "Even so, I'm grateful to hear that." Farina blinked, her posture relaxing ever so slightly as she scoffed, picking up her fork again. "HMPH, well, you should be." Rimuru chuckled softly, watching as she resumed eating her cake, though a small, satisfied smile tugged at her lips. Now the scene shifted to Snezhnaya as we see massive pillars lined the sides of the chamber, carved from dark stone and etched with intricate cryo-sigils that glowed faintly in the cold air. Rows of tall windows let in slivers of pale light, illuminating the space just enough to reveal the battered figures. Standing before an imposing throne of ice. These were the Fatui harbingers, at least, most of them. Absent were Scaramouche, Dottore, Arlecchino, and Feldway. Those present bore fresh scars on their uniforms, tears in the fabric, singed hems, and scuffs from a hard-fought battle. Some still clutched bandaged wounds. At the foot of the throne stood Piero, the first of the Fatui harbingers. Though his posture was upright and disciplined, his heavy breathing hinted at exhaustion. The faintest flicker of relief passed over his face as he bowed deeply to the shadowed figure seated above him. "Your Majesty, we have completed our mission," he reported, voice echoing in the frigid hall. "We managed to subdue and capture the dragon known as Ivaraj." From the throne, the cryo-archon, the Tsaritsa, leaned forward slightly. Her face was cast in shadow, but a trace of satisfaction curved her lips. The quiet scraping of her gloves against the icy armrests betrayed her interest. "You have done well," she said, her voice resonating with a regal chill. Though it seems it took quite a toll on all of you. Piero inclined his head. You are indeed right, Your Majesty. The creature's power was unlike anything we have faced before. Standing nearby, Columbina let out a melodic sigh. If not for that Feldway fellow, we would have perished many times over, she murmured, her tone sweet yet edged with truth. Ivaraj's corrosive aura was lethal. A figure in dark armor, Capitano, crossed his arms over his chest. His helmet's visor reflected the frosty torchlight as he rumbled, indeed. Feldway seemed to know exactly how to combat the dragon's aura. I am not surprised, he carries himself as though such matters are routine. From the side, chilled Tartaglia gave a wry grin. Well, at least I got to sharpen my skills against a legion of abyss monsters. It was a good fight. Shut up, chilled. Sandrone, arms folded, cut him off sharply. Those beasts destroyed a number of my precious puppets. Do you realize how much time and resources I'll need to rebuild them? Her eyes flashed with annoyance. Pantalone gave a polite, if sly, bow. I can always compensate you for the losses, Sandrone. Provided we come to a mutually beneficial arrangement, he offered, his tone smooth as silk. Sandrone's glare hardened. Taking your money is akin to signing a death contract, and I'm not in the mood for any additional trouble. Her refusal was as frosty as the chamber around them. The Tsaritsa observed this exchange in silence before speaking again. Where are the others? She asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a shard of ice. Piero straightened. Feldway, Scaramouche, and Dottore went on ahead to Rimuru, he explained. They plan to move forward with the next phase, especially now that we have secured the dragon. Rimuru's next destination is Rimuru, so they aim to accomplish their mission there. The Tsaritsa's gaze flickered with interest. And Arlecchino. She departed for Fontaine, Piero answered. She's negotiating with the Hydro Archon. We suspect she might also be tracking Rimuru's movements, given that he is one of Farina's personal guards. Although, from what we understand, he can utilize clones to remain in multiple places at once. The Tsaritsa pondered this for a moment, then asked, and the dragon? Where is it kept? Piero gestured to a compact device at his side, a small contraption of gears and swirling energy. Feldway created a special pocket dimension to contain Ivaraj, ensuring its corrosive aura can't harm anyone else. Then let us see this beast, the Tsaritsa commanded. She turned to the other harbingers, her tone measured. You have all done well. Take whatever rest or reprieve you need, but remain prepared. We stand on the brink of far greater trials. Nodding in unison, the remaining harbingers dispersed. Piero stepped forward and activated the device, generating a glowing portal. The Tsaritsa rose from her throne, regal and composed, and accompanied him through the swirling light. A crystalline corridor of shimmering energy greeted them. The walls looked like glass but pulsed with unfamiliar power, forming a protective barrier. Soft arcs of light danced across their surfaces, casting fractured reflections. Piero led the Tsaritsa deeper until they arrived at a large enclosure, a transparent dome made of that same unknown energy. The Tsaritsa's eyes narrowed at the subtle hum in the air. This barrier was all that stood between them and Ivaraj's deadly aura. Then, with a gentle ripple, the energy parted just enough for them to peer inside. What they saw made the Tsaritsa inhale sharply. A small child lay curled up on a smooth crystal floor. Pale skin, white hair that gleamed like moonlight, and eyes of molten gold, closed in peaceful slumber. The child wore a simple, almost robe-like outfit, an oversized scarf draped around them, and a peculiar brooch pinned near the collar. She is that dragon. The Tsaritsa murmured, disbelief coloring her usually cold voice. Piero inclined his head. Yes, Your Majesty. According to Feldway, Ivaraj is a true dragon, able to shift between a draconic and human form. Since she gained sentience relatively recently, her power is unstable. For a long moment, the Tsaritsa regarded the sleeping child. Within this unassuming figure lay a fearsome potential capable of matching even the mightiest beings. I never imagined such raw power could be contained in one so young, she whispered. Piero's gaze drifted to the small figure as well. We have Ivaraj in our grasp, but we still require Rimuru's soul fragments to move on to the next phase of our plan, he reminded her. The Tsaritsa turned away at last, her composure returning. Yes, let us go. We cannot afford to waste time. Piero deactivated the barrier, and they stepped back through the corridor. Just before the pocket dimension sealed itself, the Tsaritsa cast one final glance at the fragile child behind the energy barrier. The girl, this so-called true dragon, remained oblivious, breathing softly, unaware of the swirling machinations around her. Once outside, the Tsaritsa's expression hardened with resolve. Piero closed the portal with the device Feldway had given him, the space collapsing in on itself until it vanished into a faint wisp of light. In the silent aftermath, the Tsaritsa and Piero exchanged a knowing look. The gears of their grand design were already in motion, and soon, Rimuru, and perhaps all of Teyvat, would feel the weight of their next move. Now the scene shifted again as we see dim, flickering light revealed a narrow alleyway hemmed in by towering concrete buildings. The sky overhead glowed a faint purple from the neon signs and magical lamp posts dotting the skyline. This city could easily be mistaken for modern-day Tokyo, except for the faint hum of arcane power weaving through the air, a clear sign that magic coexisted with technology here. From a swirling tear in space, a figure stepped forward, Chloe, dressed in a pristine white cape dress layered over a black, long-sleeved top. Her waist was cinched by a black corset, and a black waist cape trailed elegantly behind her. A ruby necklace glinted at her collarbone, reflecting the stray lights of the alley. Her side ponytail shifted slightly in the breeze, revealing a delicate face that still carried an air of youthful innocence despite her regal attire. She paused, scanning the alley with bright, alert eyes. The city's bustle thrummed in the background, car engines, distant chatter, and the electric crackle of magical contraptions. Yet Chloe felt only a flicker of Rimuru's presence, like a faint echo that had long since faded. Rimuru-sensei was here, she murmured, her voice carrying both hope and resignation. But this aura is so faint. It's as though he passed through, then vanished. A rich, smooth voice resounded within her mind, Diablos. Chloe Dono, did you find Rimuru-sama? Chloe sighed softly. No, Diablo. The essence I feel is too dispersed. It's the same as before. Traces of his power are everywhere, but he himself is gone. She stepped into a more open section of the alley, the neon glow playing across her boots and the polished gauntlet glove on her left hand. Lifting her arm, she summoned a sphere of shimmering energy, completely invisible to passers-by, but radiant to her own senses. The orb pulsed in her palm before expanding outward, weaving through walls, streets, and eventually the entire city. In moments, it spread beyond the planet's atmosphere, drifting into the star-filled void of space. Undeterred, it continued outward, traversing galaxy upon galaxy, each swirl of cosmic dust illuminated by her scanning magic. Finally, the sphere rippled across an endless dimensional tapestry, brushing against infinite universes that existed side by side. A heartbeat later, the energy receded, collapsing back into the glowing orb in Chloe's hand. She dispersed it with a gentle flick of her wrist. Her eyes closed as she processed the results, but disappointment soon tinged her expression. He isn't here either, she confirmed quietly. I can't sense him anywhere in this entire dimensional cluster. An excitable voice broke through her thoughts, Ramirez, chiming in telepathically. Then let's move on. I've found another possible coordinate where Rimuru might be. Chloe nodded. Right. She focused her power again, reopening the portal she'd emerged from. Dim arcs of violet and gold energy crackled around the tear in space, creating a swirling gateway that shimmered with promise and uncertainty. Let's go, Chloe whispered, steeling herself. She took one final glance at the futuristic skyline, a silent testament to a world that blended magic and machinery, then stepped forward. With a rush of wind, she disappeared into the vortex, her cape fluttering behind her. In the alley's sudden stillness, the swirling portal sealed itself, leaving no trace of the extraordinary visitor who had probed the boundaries of an entire multiverse in mere moments. Now we see a spacious room filled with mismatched furniture and a jumble of magical artifacts. That was where Ramirez and Veldora found themselves, seated before a large, crystalline screen. The screen glowed with shifting colors and lines, reflecting Chloe's dimensional journey in real time. Various arcane instruments beeped and whirred on a side table, monitoring Chloe's every step as she hopped from world to world. Ramirez, her tiny wings fluttering with excitement, jabbed a finger at the screen. There, Veldora. See that faint trail? Chloe's heading to the next coordinate. Veldora, lounging in a wide-backed armchair clearly meant for someone half his size, let out a booming laugh. Yes, I see it. But it's so small. If only I could go with her and show her the true might of a storm dragon. He crossed his arms proudly, then leaned forward to squint at the display. Standing beside them was Diablo, his posture impeccably straight, gloved hands folded behind his back. His eyes tracked every flicker on the screen. A subtle tension rippled through him, as though he were ready to spring into action the moment Chloe found a trace of Rimuru. Meanwhile, across the room, chaos of a more mundane variety was unfolding. The demoness trio, Ultima, Testarossa, and Carrera, were in a heated exchange with Guy Crimson, the self-proclaimed Lord of Darkness. They'd gathered around a small table, upon which sat a plate of decadent cake slices, each one intricately decorated and bearing a faint, sweet aroma that even Veldora occasionally glanced at longingly. "Watch your tongue, Guy," Ultima hissed, pink eyes blazing. "Just because you're strong doesn't mean I'll let you off for this." Guy lounged on a plush sofa, one leg draped casually over the other. He seemed entirely unbothered by Ultima's outburst, lifting a fork loaded with a bite of cake. "You're getting riled up over a trivial dessert," he drawled, taking a slow, deliberate bite. "It's not like Rimuru will mind if I indulge a little." Testarossa's scarlet eyes narrowed. "These cakes come from Rimuru-sama's personal collection. He saved them for himself, for a reason." "So what?" Guy shrugged, eyes half-lidded. "It's just some cakes." That dismissive tone sparked another flash of anger in Carrera, who slammed a fist on the table, causing the plate to rattle. "You're as arrogant as ever, Guy. If you want to settle this, let's do it the old-fashioned way." She cracked her knuckles, lightning dancing around her fingertips. Guy waved a hand dismissively. "No thanks. You'd run off again the moment you realize I'm winning. Besides, I'd hate to break anything in here, like your pride." Standing off to one side was Misery, standing straight, lips set in a thin line. She cast the occasional weary glance at the group, silently wondering why she has to become the reluctant babysitter for such powerful, and volatile, entities. "Why must I be the one to keep them from tearing each other apart over dessert?" she thought, exhaling softly. All the while, Rain, another of Guy's companions, sat at a small easel in the corner, painting a portrait. Empty wine bottles surrounded her feet, rolling gently whenever she shifted her position. Every so often, she'd look up from her canvas to watch the demoness trio and Guy bicker, an amused glimmer in her eyes. She didn't intervene, though, perhaps because the scene provided endless inspiration for her artwork. Occasionally, the ruckus from the cake debate drifted over to Ramirez and Veldora, who would glance away from the screen in annoyance. Diablo maintained his stoic silence, ignoring the argument behind him. The tension in the air was thick with magic, bravado, and the sweet smell of half-eaten cake. At the heart of the bustling city of Tempest, Benimaru stood on a raised stone platform, surveying the scene with a keen, determined gaze. All around him, crowds of citizens, humans, monsters, and demi-humans alike, moved in an organized rush. New arrivals poured through the city gates, their curiosity evident as they observed the harmony of Tempest's diverse populace. Benimaru raised an arm, calling for silence. The throng of people quickly stilled, hanging on his every word. "Stay calm, everyone. We have measures in place for your safety," he announced, his voice echoing across the open square. "Please follow the guides posted around the city if you need directions or accommodations." Around him, goblins in neat uniforms patrolled the streets, each carrying a short spear or wearing light armor emblazoned with Tempest's emblem. Their eyes darted left and right, ensuring that no one slipped through their watch. They carried themselves with an air of discipline, ready to respond at the slightest hint of trouble. Further in the distance, Sue's elite troops melted in and out of the shadows, their presence nearly imperceptible. Clad in dark attire, they slipped through alleyways and clung to rooftops, using a combination of stealth and magic to maintain a near-constant perimeter sweep. Every so often, one of them would pause to scan the horizon, then vanish again, almost as if they had never been there. Without Rimuru's leadership on site, a cautious tension hung in the air. Benimaru could sense the unease, but he channeled it into heightened vigilance rather than fear. He turned to a squad of hobgoblins standing at attention, each one armed with sturdy equipment. "You'll guard the western gate," he instructed firmly. "Check every caravan entering the city. We can't afford any lapses in security right now." They saluted, then hurried off to take their positions. From behind him, a small group of Kijin, Benimaru's own kin, stepped forward to await orders, their weapons gleaming under the midday sun. The crisp sound of their armor plates shifting underscored the gravity of the moment. Across the plaza, city dwellers went about their business, though they couldn't ignore the influx of patrols. Many looked reassured by the show of strength, while others whispered anxious speculation about why security had become so tight. Whispers of, "What is happening?" floated through the crowd, but the steady presence of the guards and Benimaru's calm authority kept people from panicking. Benimaru gave the square one final scan. His eyes landed on a few suspicious figures huddled near a side street, and he subtly motioned to a pair of Sue's ninjas. Within seconds, the shadows flickered, and the figures were approached for questioning. Satisfied that the city's defenses were solid, Benimaru exhaled, letting his tension subside. "We'll keep Tempest safe until Rimuru-sama returns," he vowed silently. "No matter what comes our way, we stand ready." And so, the city of Tempest bustled on, stronger, more alert, and united under Benimaru's steadfast guidance in Rimuru's absence. Rimuru stood beside Farina, his posture relaxed but his senses keenly focused. The Hydro-Archon sat at her desk, her delicate fingers gliding over a series of neatly stacked documents sent by Nuvalet. The room was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of paper as she flipped through each report. A soft glow from the dimming sun filtered through the tall windows, casting golden hues upon the marble floor. As she lifted the next sheet and scanned its contents, her brows furrowed slightly. "How unusual," she murmured, her voice tinged with curiosity. Rimuru glanced at her. "What happened, Miss Farina?" She placed the document flat on the desk and tapped it lightly. "It seems there's been a noticeable increase in monster activity within Fontaine's borders. In addition, the flow of the ley lines appears to be somewhat disrupted." Hearing this, Rimuru's gaze sharpened. He reached forward, picking up the report and scanning it himself. The information was detailed, outlining various sightings of unusually aggressive monsters in the region. More concerning, however, was the mention of anomalies in the ley lines. A series of thoughts ran through Rimuru's mind. What could be the cause? There were many possibilities. Perhaps it was a natural fluctuation, or maybe an external force. Was it play? The memories of his battle against Ivaraj surfaced momentarily. Could this somehow be connected? He couldn't be sure just yet. Despite the many theories forming in his mind, Rimuru chose to keep his thoughts to himself for now. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Farina, who was still deep in thought as she read further into the report. As he observed her, another idea crossed his mind. Rimuru, the land of wisdom and home to the Dendro-Archon. If anyone in Teyvat had knowledge of the ley lines and their disruptions, it would be her. After all, she was deeply connected to the Irminsul, the great tree that wove itself into the fabric of this world's history and knowledge. If the disturbances in Fontaine's ley lines are truly unnatural, then the Dendro-Archon might have answers. But before that, there was still unfinished business to attend to. The chasm. Rimuru had intended to go there for some investigations and a commission. There were lingering mysteries beneath the depths, and given the recent events, it was even more crucial to ensure that nothing dangerous was festering in the shadows. His gaze lingered on Farina for a moment longer before he made his decision. Without a word, Rimuru activated his ability, allowing his consciousness to shift seamlessly into the body of his clone that was currently with Ether and Paimon. It was time to move forward. Rimuru's consciousness seamlessly transferred back into his clone's body, bringing him to the location where Ether and Paimon were battling a group of monsters. The clash of metal echoed in the air as Ether's blade struck down the last of the creatures, while Paimon hovered nearby, observing the fight closely. Rimuru took a moment to assess the surroundings. The battlefield was littered with fading remnants of elemental energy, the defeated monsters dissolving into motes of light as they returned to the ley lines. Seeing that the fight had concluded, he stepped forward, his voice calm yet carrying its usual playful ease. "Well, I'm back." Ether and Paimon turned to face him, both catching their breath from the fight. "Oh, welcome back, Rimuru," Ether greeted, sheathing his sword. Paimon floated closer, waving her little hands. "You sure took your time. We were starting to think you ditched us." Rimuru chuckled. "Come on now, you know I wouldn't do that. Just had to handle some things back in Fontaine." As he walked up to them, he asked, "So, did anything unusual happen while I was away?" Ether shook his head. Not really. Just finishing up commissions for the day. Paimon nodded, crossing her arms. Yeah, nothing weird happened. Just the usual, monsters, collecting stuff, running errands. You know, classic Adventurers Guild work. Rimuru gave a satisfied nod. Good to know. In that case, I think we should start preparing for our next step. Both Ether and Paimon looked at him curiously as he continued. Our next major stop is the chasm. We need to explore it properly before heading to Sumeru. But there's no rush, since we still have a week left in Inazuma, we can take care of anything else that needs attention here first. Ether nodded in agreement. That makes sense. The chasm is known for being dangerous, so we should be well prepared before heading there. Paimon, however, pouted slightly. More dark caves and scary places. Why can't we just go straight to Sumeru and enjoy the scenery? Rimuru smirked. Now where's the fun in that, Paimon? Besides, if there's something lurking in the chasm, it's better we deal with it sooner rather than later. Paimon sighed dramatically. Fine, but if we run into anything spooky, you're dealing with it. Rimuru chuckled. Deal. With their plan set, Ether stretched his arms, rolling his shoulders. Before all that, though, we should grab something to eat. We've been running around all day, and I could use a good meal. Paimon's eyes sparkled instantly. Yes. Finally, someone who understands. Let's get something delicious. Rimuru laughed. All right then, food first. We can discuss the details of our trip afterward. As the trio sat enjoying their meal, Rimuru suddenly sensed something. A soft glow emitted from the small transmission ball he had created for relaying messages. Setting down his chopsticks, he retrieved the ball and activated it, causing a message to appear before his eyes. Reading through it, Rimuru's expression remained neutral as he processed the contents. Looks like A has gone through the contract. She's ready to sign, but she still has some questions and wants us to meet her at Tenshukaku. Paimon, who had been stuffing her mouth with food, blinked and swallowed quickly. She still has questions. I thought she already agreed to everything. Rimuru smiled slightly. Well, considering it's about the future of this nation, it's natural for her to be cautious. A leader has to consider every possibility before making a decision. Ether nodded in agreement. That makes sense. We should head there soon. With that, the three of them quickly finished their meal and set off towards Tenshukaku. The streets of Inazuma were calm as they made their way toward the Grand Castle. The cool evening breeze rustled through the banners and lanterns that lined the streets, casting a serene yet dignified atmosphere around them. Upon reaching the entrance, the guards stepped aside, already aware of their expected arrival. They proceeded inside, eventually stepping into the throne room where Raiden A stood with Yae Miko beside her. As soon as they entered, Yae Miko's mischievous voice greeted them. Ah, the little ones have finally arrived. Her teasing tone was met with a slightly exasperated look from Paimon, who puffed her cheeks. Rimuru, however, remained composed as he addressed them. I assume you've both gone through the contract. Raiden A gave a small nod, her expression as stoic as ever. Yae Miko simply grinned, watching the exchange unfold with amusement. Good, Rimuru continued. Then what are the questions you wanted to ask? A glanced at Yae Miko for a moment, as if silently confirming something. Yae, in response, gave her a knowing smile and gestured for her to speak. Go on, don't worry. He won't deny it, Yae teased. A exhaled lightly before turning back to Rimuru. I do not have concerns about the contract itself, but rather. I have a request. If possible, I want to spar with you frequently so that I may hone my skills further. Paimon, who had been expecting some kind of legal debate over the contract, nearly choked on air. Wait, that's it. I thought this was going to be something serious about the agreement. Rimuru chuckled at Paimon's reaction but nodded at A's request. I see, so that's what you wanted to discuss. Well, I don't mind, he paused before glancing at Ether with a smirk. Don't you think the traveler here would be a good match for you? Raiden A folded her arms, tilting her head slightly. I do not mind. There are very few who can truly challenge me in combat, which is why I have not been able to practice often. Ether looked thoughtful for a moment before Rimuru added, besides, this would be a good opportunity for you to test out your new transformation, the one you used against Azathoth. The mention of his past battle made Ether's eyes widen slightly as he recalled the form Rimuru was referring to. After a moment, he clenched his fists and nodded. Oh, right. I remember that. Ye Miko's ears perked up with interest. Oh my, this sounds intriguing. Little one, do you have some hidden power we don't know about? Paimon crossed her arms and nodded proudly. Of course. Traveler super strong. Even scary gods aren't a match for him when he's serious. A's expression remained calm, but there was a glint of anticipation in her eyes. Very well. Then let us test this strength of yours.